In today's lesson, we are going to talk about a topic called overriding methods. So we're going to compare the difference between overloading, which we already learned about, overriding, and then just general rules and syntax, and then in class we'll go through a coding example on the computer. Okay, so first of all, let's recap from first semester. And I apologize for my throat. My voice is a little scratchy today, but needed to get the video done, so you're just going to have to deal. Sorry. We have overloaded methods. So these are methods that are in the same class and have the same name, but different parameters. So these are two different examples of overloaded methods. They are both called have birthday. And one of these methods takes takes no parameters, and the other method takes a parameter called string message. And then when the method is called in the code, what happens is that the compiler goes through and it looks for which method has the correct signature, meaning which one has the correct number of arguments, and that's how it determines which code to follow. So that's why we have to have a different signature or a different number or order of parameters so the computer knows which one to use. And this is when the methods are in the same Java file, the same .java file. Now, overriding methods, this is a little bit different. This is when a subclass goes ahead and redefines the way that the code works from its superclass. So before we talk about this dog example, a way to think about this might be, let's say, for example, your family always has this special meatball recipe, and it's been passed down, and your grandma made it this way, and then your mom made it this way, and then all of a sudden you're vegan. So you make your meatball recipe a little bit differently. You make the unmeatball. And so you decide to have everybody over, and you say, hey, we're going to have meatballs today, and you say, I'm making meatballs, and you call the method make meatballs, and if you call this method, you're going to make meatballs the way that you do. You're going to make them with your vegan recipe. Now, if your mom made meatballs, she would use them using her recipe, so she would use the inherited meatballs recipe. So essentially, when we have a superclass, we inherit methods from them, but that doesn't mean we have to use them. If we want, we can redefine them. So what's going to happen is that the compiler is going to go ahead and it's going to look to see if when you call a method, if you have code for it. And if you have code for it, Java will run it. If you don't have code for it, Java will look at your superclass and then it'll keep on going up because you can have more than one class above you. It will keep on going up the hierarchy until it finds a class that has that method. And then if none of the classes above you have that method, it will tell you that no method exists. Okay, so now let's get back to the specific example. So here I have a class called dog, and then I have a class called hound, which extends dog. So we can tell that hound is the subclass of dog. So what does that mean? That means that the hound class has everything that dog has and more. And since dog happens to have a method called bark, then so does hound. However, we can see here that the bark method has been redefined. Now notice it has the exact same parameter list. So this is not the same thing as overloading. It is exactly written exactly the same way. And so what's going to happen is that when the code is run, and if I were in my driver program, if I created a new hound object and I had that object reference, so pup, call the bark method. Since pup is a hound, what's going to happen is Java will look in the hound code. So Java looks in the hound code. Is this the bark method? No. Is this the bark method? Yes. And it's going to go ahead and it's going to execute this code. I don't really know why a hound would say bull, but that's irrelevant. That's exactly what's going to happen here. Okay. So let me just recap some of those things I said a minute ago, and we'll see them again in the context of the notes. So the compiler will first try to call the method from the object's class. So it's going to look within its own class. That's kind of like saying, if we went back to my meatball recipe, do you have a recipe for meatballs? No, I don't. Okay, does your mom? No, she doesn't. Okay, does your grandma? Oh, yeah, she does. Okay, let's use your grandma's recipe. That's kind of like how this works. So it's going to first look to see if you have a method. And if you don't have a method, then the compiler will go up to the superclass and then up a level above that and then up and so forth until it finds what it needs. Now, we also have the ability to do something called partial overriding. And partial overriding is when you want to do something in addition to what you want the superclass to do. So if we wanted that to happen, we would say super.methodName to execute the superclass's method at any time. Okay, so here's an example of this. Let's say that your meatballs are going to be fried. Let's say you were like, you know what, forget it. I'm not going to go vegan. We're just going to go the other direction and make these meatballs extra unhealthy. So you're going to have your public void meatballs. You can tell that I'm hungry while I'm making this video. And the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to make your mom's meatball recipe. So that's what this is right here. When you say super.meatballs, you are making your mom's meatballs recipe. And then now, I'm just going to write this as pseudocode because, now we're going to fry the meatballs. And then that'll be the end of my method. Okay, so the first thing that I'm doing is I'm doing whatever my mom would have done, and then I'm going to add to it. So we can call the superclasses method so that we can access what that does and then build on top of it. And then the last thing that's important to know is that any private method of the superclass cannot be overridden. So they're inherited. We can still call them, but we can't change them. So this allows our superclass to define a method to give us functionality, but to not let us change it. All right, so what we're going to do in class today is we're going to play around with this class hierarchy. Shapes are always a really easy thing to do with inheritance. So we're going to play around with creating some different methods, some constructors, and then we'll get into more of the coding of how we can do our overriding of methods. All right, thanks. That's it. Have a great day.